Ambassador Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the seal of the Thraxian Compact's diplomatic hall. The metal felt cold, colder than it should have been for a world orbiting a yellow star. "You're nervous," said Jorik, her cultural attaché, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Elena didn't deny it. "I always am before we give away something valuable." The doors opened. Inside waited 57 Thraxian delegates, their angular bodies arranged in precise geometric patterns across the negotiation floor. Each one wore the traditional gray robes of formal proceedings. No ornamentation, no variation, no suggestion of individuality. The Thraxians had built their civilization on the principle that emotion was noise and noise was failure. To them, humans must have sounded like screaming. Elena walked to her designated position, her footsteps echoing against polished stone. The chamber had been designed to amplify every sound, every breath, every heartbeat. The Thraxians believed this encouraged honesty. Elena believed it encouraged paranoia. High Minister Torval stood at the center, his ridged skull catching the overhead light. He did not bow. The Thraxians did not bow. They simply waited, a form of greeting that suggested the other party should be grateful for their patience. "Ambassador Vasquez," Torval said, his translator unit flattening his native clicks into manufactured syllables. "You bring the proposal." "I bring peace," Elena replied. She placed a data cylinder on the negotiation table physical media, a concession to the Thraxian distrust of wireless transmission. "Humanity offers trade routes through Sol system, access to our medical technologies, joint research on stellar navigation." Torval's eyes, dark and unblinking, studied her face. "And in exchange?" "Non-aggression, mutual defense if either party faces existential threat, and the return of your spies currently imprisoned on Mars." The chamber went still. Elena had chosen her words carefully. No Thraxian had admitted to espionage, and no human had publicly confirmed the arrests. But Torval's left hand twitched. A small movement, almost nothing. She caught it. "You have evidence of these spies," Torval said, not a question. "I have their confessions, their real names, their family compounds on the Raxus Prime." Elena allowed herself a small smile. "We also have their favorite foods, their medical histories, and the names of their first bondmates. Humans are very thorough when someone steals from us." The delegates shifted, not quite whispering, that would have been emotional, but adjusting their posture in ways that suggested discomfort. Torval's jaw tightened. "Your species is volatile," he said. "Your history shows constant conflict. Your biology produces stress responses that would cripple any sane creature, and you expect us to trust you with our security." Elena leaned forward. "High Minister, we've been fighting each other since we lived in caves. We've turned entire oceans into graveyards. We've built weapons that could crack planets, and somehow, despite all of that, we're still here, still reaching out, still trying to talk." She tapped the data cylinder. "That's not volatility. That's resilience." Torval stared at her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand, the Thraxian gesture of acceptance. "We will review your terms," he said, "but understand, Ambassador, if this is deception." "It isn't. The consequences will be absolute." Elena took his hand. His grip was strong, almost painful, as if testing her endurance. She held steady. "Humanity understands consequences," she said, "better than you know." The signing ceremony began. Delegates filed forward, each one placing their mark on the digital treaty. Elena watched the security perimeter, human and Thraxian officers standing shoulder to shoulder, a symbol of cooperation that had taken 3 years to arrange. Jorik moved to her side. "It's going well." "It's going too well," Elena murmured. "Torval's military advisors aren't here. Where are they?" Jorik scanned the room. "Probably boycotting. The military faction never wanted this treaty." They boycotted the negotiation phase too, but they still sent observers. Elena's eyes tracked across the chamber. Find them. Jorik nodded and slipped away. Elena returned her attention to the ceremony, but something felt wrong, a pressure behind her eyes, a tension in her chest that had nothing to do with nerves. She remembered later that she had exactly 4 seconds to react. The device had been planted beneath the delegate seating, not where security would check, because security never checked under their own chairs. Elena saw the light flicker in Torval's eyes, saw his expression shift from confusion to horror, and she understood. This wasn't an attack on the treaty. This was an attack on proof that the treaty had ever existed. She moved without thinking. Jorik was closest, her attaché, her friend, a man with 3 children waiting on Mars. Elena grabbed his collar and threw him toward the exit. Then she turned toward the device. Not to stop it, there was no time. To stand between it and everyone else. The explosion tore through the chamber. Stones shattered. Bodies flew. Elena felt her ribs crack, felt her legs give way, felt the heat wash across her back like a wave of molten iron. She hit the ground and kept her eyes open. Torval was alive, bleeding, broken, but alive. Jorik was crawling toward the door, screaming something she couldn't hear. Other delegates lay scattered across the floor, some moving, some not. Elena tried to speak. Her lungs wouldn't cooperate. Tell them, she thought, tell them I didn't beg. The last thing she saw was the ceiling collapsing. The last thing she heard was Jorik's voice, finally cutting through the ringing in her ears. He's alive, get help, the ambassador is down. Then nothing. 3 light-years away, Admiral Marcus Webb watched the transmission loop for the 17th time. Elena Vasquez had been his friend for 20 years. She had taught his daughter to ride a horse. She had cried at his wife's funeral when he couldn't. And now she was dead, murdered by cowards who wanted to stop peace. Webb picked up his comm unit. He had one word to send to every human fleet in the galaxy. Recall. The Interstellar Council expected outrage. They prepared for emergency sessions, for human delegates screaming accusations, for demands of immediate justice and compensation. They drafted response protocols for every possible escalation, economic sanctions, military posturing, even formal declarations of grievance. What they got was silence. Earth's diplomatic corps vanished. Every embassy, every consulate, every cultural exchange office shuttered within 48 standard hours. The last transmission from the human seat on the council came not from an ambassador but from a maintenance technician. We are listening to our dead. Do not contact us. The Thraxian Compact issued a statement within 6 hours of the bombing. Initial investigations suggested human security failures, perhaps even human negligence, though they would cooperate fully with any inquiry. High Minister Torval, recovering from severe wounds, could not comment directly, but his office made clear that the Thraxian military personnel had followed all protocols. They did not mention that the device had been planted by the Thraxian hands. They did not mention that the assassin wore a colonel's insignia. And they certainly did not mention that the attack had been authorized by the Thraxian Defense Council's Internal Security Division, the same division that had opposed the treaty from its first draft. Admiral Marcus Webb knew all of this within 72 hours. Human intelligence had spent 3 years mapping the Thraxian command structures, financial networks, and personal relationships, not because humanity planned to attack, but because Elena Vasquez had insisted. Trust is beautiful, she once told Webb, but trust with open eyes is survival. Those open eyes now watched every transmission, every movement, every breath inside the Thraxian military command. They think we're grieving, said Commander Saren Watanabe, Webb's intelligence chief. Her voice carried no judgment, only calculation. They're accelerating their consolidation, military promotions, asset seizures. They're preparing for us to collapse inward. Webb studied the holographic display. 23 human warships had scattered across known space after the bombing. 17 more remained in Sol system. The Thraxians believed this indicated confusion, disorganization, the natural response of a species too emotional to function under pressure. They don't understand, Webb said quietly. They think our silence means we're hurt. Aren't we? Yes, Webb turned from the display. His eyes looked ancient, not in the way of legends, but in the way of a man who had buried too many friends and was about to bury more. But hurt doesn't mean broken. Hurt means hungry. Hurt means we've stopped pretending to be civilized. Saren waited. She had served under Webb for 12 years. She knew when he was thinking and when he was deciding. Call the families, Webb said. Every crew member, every Marine, every pilot. Tell them we're going to war. The Council can file a complaint after we're done. Webb's voice hardened. Elena didn't die for protocols. She died because some arrogant cowards thought humans wouldn't fight back. They thought we'd cry, negotiate, accept their version of justice. He activated his personal console. They were wrong. The display shifted. Satellite imagery, financial records, personnel files, all centered on 37 specific individuals. The conspirators, the planners, the hands that planted the bomb. We're not going to kill them, Webb said. Not yet. First, we're going to show them exactly how much we know. Every secret, every affair, every hidden account. We're going to broadcast their sins to every Thraxian home, every trading partner, every neutral observer. Saren frowned. That violates every convention on intelligence warfare. I know, Webb almost smiled. That's the point. 3 days later, the first transmission hit. Every Thraxian military channel, every government frequency, every public information network, simultaneously flooded with data. Names, dates, financial transfers, recordings of conspirators discussing the assassination in rooms they believed secure. The message attached was simple. You killed one of us. We have counted your children, all of them. Thraxian Prime erupted in chaos. Citizens demanded answers. The military faction denied everything, but their denials came too late, too weak, too obviously manufactured. High Minister Torval, still recovering in a medical facility, watched the broadcasts with growing horror. He knew some of the names. He had served with some of the officers. He had trusted them. What have you done? He whispered to his empty room. The answer came not from his people but from the void between stars. Human ships had stopped vanishing. They had regrouped, and they were moving. Not toward the Thraxian military positions. Toward the Thraxian colonies. Toward the Thraxian civilians. Webb stood on the bridge of the Elena's stand, watching the star map fill with trajectories. His officers moved with quiet efficiency. No shouting, no panic, just the cold precision of professionals who had been given a mission they believed in. Admiral, Saren said from her station, the Thraxian defense networks are activating. They're mobilizing reserve fleets. Let them. Webb touched the display, tracing a path toward the outer colonies. They're afraid of what we'll do to their soldiers. They should be afraid of what we'll do to their supply lines. No, Webb's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They should be afraid of what we'll do to their conscience. The Elena stand jumped to faster than light. Behind it, the rest of humanity's fleet followed. The Thraxian Defense Council held an emergency session. Admiral Thrak, the architect of the assassination, stood before his peers and declared the humans were bluffing. They don't have the logistics, he said. They don't have the numbers. This is posturing, morning theater. The council voted, unanimous, full military authorization. Thrak returned to his command center and found his personal screens displaying a single image. The face of his youngest offspring, asleep in their bed, safe at home. The timestamp on the image was 5 minutes old. Beneath it a message: "We know where everyone sleeps." Thrak ordered his family moved to a secure military facility within the hour. He ordered his personal guard doubled. He ordered the Thraxian defense network to full combat readiness, protocols that hadn't been activated in 70 years. And then he waited. The humans didn't come. Days passed. The Thraxian ships held position at every jump point, every trade route, every colony approach. Intelligence analysts worked around shifts, parsing the human transmissions, tracking the movements of civilian vessels, searching for any pattern that might reveal the enemy's intentions. Nothing. Human ships appeared on long-range sensors, held position for exactly 11 minutes and vanished. Human broadcasts continued, not threats, not demands, but something far more unsettling. History lessons, cultural exchanges, documentaries about human warfare, human diplomacy, human forgiveness. "We're not fighting soldiers," Sarin told Webb aboard the Alina stand. "We're fighting an ideology. Thrak's faction believes strength means destruction. If we match that, we prove them right." Webb nodded slowly. "So we fight differently." "We fight like humans." Sarin pulled up a holographic display. "We fight like people who have spent 10,000 years learning that war doesn't end when the last shot is fired. War ends when one side decides mercy costs less than revenge." The display showed the Thraxian society, not the military, not the government, but the people, workers, parents, artists, children, each one represented by data points collected over years of patient observation. "Thrak thinks we'll target military assets," Sarin continued. "He's prepared for that. He's not prepared for us to target his population's trust." "Explain." "We flood every Thraxian home with evidence of the conspiracy. Not just the assassination, the cover-up, the financial manipulation, the lies Thrak told his own people to justify the attack. We make every Thraxian citizen ask themselves, who really started this war?" Webb studied the display. Sarin's plan was ruthless not because it caused direct harm, but because it weaponized truth. The Thraxian society had been built on hierarchy and obedience. Questioning authority was almost impossible for them. Almost. But humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of impossible questions. "Do it," Webb said. On the Raxus Prime, Jorik waited. The cultural attaché had survived the bombing with a shattered arm and 3 broken ribs. He had spent the intervening weeks in a medical facility, watched over by nurses who treated him with professional courtesy and nothing more. No one asked about his recovery. No one asked about Alina. The Thraxians did not believe in mourning. Jorik did not care what they believed. He had spent every waking moment studying his captors, their routines, their weaknesses, their fears. He had befriended a junior security officer who didn't know she was providing intelligence. He had mapped the facility's ventilation systems, power conduits, communication channels. And he had received exactly one message from Earth: "Wait for our signal." He was still waiting when the first civilian broadcast hit. The medical facility's public screens flickered. Patients looked up from their beds. Staff paused at their stations. The image that appeared was not news, not entertainment, but a recording, grainy, unstable, clearly captured without permission. It showed Admiral Thrak meeting with his co-conspirators. Their words were clear. Their intentions were unmistakable. "The humans will retaliate, will claim self-defense. The Council will support us once they see the damage." "What if the humans don't attack?" "Then we attack them first. We control the narrative, we control the evidence, we control." The recording cut off. A human voice replaced it, calm, measured, utterly without anger. "You are not our enemy. Your leaders chose murder. We choose to remember what you forget, that war ends when one side decides mercy costs less than revenge." The screens went dark. Silence. Then someone started screaming. Jorik moved. The chaos gave him cover. Nurses ran to calm patients. Security officers rushed to investigate the broadcast source. No one watched the human with the broken arm and the steady eyes. He found the junior security officer in Corridor 7. She was young, frightened, clearly questioning everything she had been taught. "The humans are coming," Jorik said. "Not to kill you, to save you from your leaders." "I don't understand." "You will." Jorik pressed a data chip into her hand. "This contains everything you need. Every name, every lie, every crime. Give it to someone who matters." She looked at the chip, looked at him. "Why should I trust you?" Jorik almost laughed. "Because my friend died protecting your people. Because your leaders tried to bury her in a lie. Because trust isn't about deserving it. Trust is about choosing it." He turned and walked toward the exit. No one stopped him. On the bridge of the Alina's stand, Admiral Webb received a single transmission from the surface of the Raxus Prime. "The signal has been sent. The people are waking up." Webb closed his eyes. Alina's face appeared behind his lids, smiling, fierce, impossibly alive. "Godspeed," he whispered. Then he opened his eyes and gave the order. "Launch the first wave." They came without warning. Not warships, at least, not in any form the Raxians recognized. Human hunter-killer platforms drifted from the darkness between stars, silent and cold, their hulls absorbing electromagnetic radiation so completely that sensors registered only empty space. The Raxian defense grid activated. Cannons tracked empty coordinates. Computers calculated firing solutions for targets that didn't exist. Then the platform spoke. Electronic warfare, but not the brute force jamming the Raxians had trained against. Human signals slipped through defensive layers like water through cracked stone, finding pathways that should have been impossible, exploiting protocols that had been considered secure for generations. Planetary governors watched their displays dissolve into static. Military commanders lost contact with their fleets. Civilian networks remained functional, broadcasting the same message on every channel, every frequency, every screen. "Your defense grid is disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your leaders lied to you." The words hung in the air. Then the carriers arrived. Human vessels, massive, blocky, utterly without the elegant lines of the Raxian ship design. They positioned themselves above every major population center, every industrial hub, every colony with more than 10,000 residents. And then they opened their bays. Not weapons. Rescue vessels. Small craft descended through the Raxian atmospheres, broadcasting landing coordinates, evacuation routes, medical support frequencies. Human pilots spoke directly to the Raxian civilians, not in demands but in warnings. "We will destroy your military infrastructure. Your people will not be harmed. Evacuation transports are available at these coordinates. Medical support is available at these coordinates. Your children will be safe." Some Raxians refused to believe. They had been told humans were savages, emotional wrecks, incapable of strategic thinking. This wasn't strategic. This was madness. Others remembered the broadcast, the recording, the names of the conspirators. They started moving. Admiral Thrak watched from his command bunker as the first evacuation transports lifted from the Raxus Prime's surface. Human pilots flew with precision, avoiding residential areas, targeting only military assets, and even then, only after evacuation corridors had been cleared. "This is a trick," he told his staff. "They're gathering hostages, targeting our population for psychological warfare." His intelligence chief disagreed. "Sir, the humans aren't taking anyone against their will. They're offering transport to neutral space. They're providing medical care to our wounded. They're manipulating you." "Sir, with respect, I've analyzed the data. 300,000 of our citizens have accepted human evacuation. None have reported mistreatment. None have been detained. The humans are doing exactly what they promised. Thrax slammed his fist against the display. Then they're idiots. You don't win wars by protecting the enemy's civilians. You win by making surrender the only option. Maybe, the intelligence chief said quietly, they're not trying to win a war. Webb stood on the observation deck of the Alina stand, watching the evacuation unfold below. 23 major population centers. 3 billion Thraxian civilians. Every single one offered safe passage before the first shot was fired. The council is demanding an explanation, Sarin reported from behind him. They're calling this aggressive displacement. They're calling it wrong. Webb didn't turn around. We're not displacing anyone. We're giving them a choice. Stay and risk military collateral damage, or leave and watch their oppressors fall. And if they stay, then we don't fire until the last civilian is clear, even if it takes months, even if it costs us ships. Webb's voice carried absolute certainty. Alina didn't die so we could become executioners. She died so we could prove that mercy and strength aren't opposites. Sarin was silent for a moment. Then, the first military target is ready. The Thraxian Orbital Command Station, 12,000 personnel. All evacuation transports have reported clear. Webb turned. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no grief. Fire. The Alina stand launched a single missile. It traveled for 11 seconds, crossed 20,000 kilometers, and struck the Thraxian Orbital Command Station's primary reactor core. The explosion was silent in vacuum, a brief flower of light, then debris, then nothing. 12,000 Thraxian personnel had been evacuated 7 hours earlier. The station's weapons platforms, command systems, and data archives were gone. Its people were safe. Across the system, similar strikes eliminated military infrastructure one target at a time. Planetary defense networks, deep space surveillance arrays, logistics depots, supply routes. Each strike preceded by evacuation warnings, followed by confirmation that no civilians remained in the blast radius. The Thraxian military found itself blind, crippled, and surrounded by an enemy that refused to kill. They're dismantling us, Thrax operations chief said, his voice hollow. Piece by piece. We can't fight back because we can't see them. We can't negotiate because they won't talk. We can't even sacrifice ourselves because they won't let us. Thrax stared at the tactical display. Human ships moved through the Thraxian space like surgeons through a body, precise, methodical, absolutely certain of every cut. They're not trying to beat us, he whispered. Then what are they trying to do? Thrax didn't answer. But he knew. They were trying to make the Thraxian people ask why any of this was necessary. On the Thraxis Prime, High Minister Torval finally left his medical facility. He walked through streets filled with confused, frightened citizens. Human evacuation transports idled in the distance, waiting for anyone who wanted to leave. Torval approached one of the human pilots, a young woman with tired eyes and steady hands. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. The pilot looked at him. "Because your people didn't kill our ambassador. A few of your people did. The rest of you are just caught in the middle. And when this is over..." The pilot almost smiled. "When this is over, we'll still be here, still offering peace, still hopping you'll take it." She paused. "But we'll be watching, we'll always be watching." The broadcasts continued. Every day, every hour, every moment of silence between human strikes, the transmissions filled the Thraxian networks with truth they couldn't escape. Names of conspirators, evidence of corruption, recordings of military officers mocking their own citizens for believing in honor. And then came the images that broke everything. Human medics treating the Thraxian wounded. Not prisoners, not collaborators, enemies, soldiers who had fired on human ships, who had sworn to destroy the human invasion, who had been taught their entire lives that mercy was weakness. Human hands bandaged their burns. Human supplies replaced their lost blood. Human ships carried them to medical facilities that should have been reserved for the enemy's own kind. One image spread faster than any other. A human marine, armor scorched from battle, kneeling beside a Thraxian child pulled from a collapsing bunker. The marine's face showed no triumph, no hatred, just exhaustion and a desperate hope that the child would survive. The caption came from the human broadcasting network. "This is who we are. This is who you could be." The Thraxian society fractured along fault lines no one had known existed. Civilians demanded answers. Military personnel deserted by the thousands, refusing to fight an enemy that treated them better than their own commanders. Colony governments declared neutrality, then full withdrawal from the compact, then open cooperation with human evacuation efforts. Admiral Thrak watched his empire crumble in 12 standard days. "They're not beating us," he told his remaining loyal officers. "They're converting us." "Sir, we have reports of entire fleet units standing down, crews refusing orders, officers." "I know what I have." Thrak's voice carried something new, fear, not of death, of being wrong, of having started a war that would end not with his victory but with his people thanking the enemy for saving them. "There's one option remaining," his security chief said quietly. "We could." "No," Thrak cut him off. "We won't escalate. We won't give them the excuse to become what we said they were." "Then what do we do?" Thrak stared at the display. Human ships continued their patient work, disarming military assets, protecting civilian populations, offering mercy at every opportunity. "We wait," he said. "We see what they do next." What the humans did next changed everything. Admiral Webb broadcast directly to every Thraxian home. His face appeared on screens across the compact, weathered, tired, unmistakably human. Behind him, the bridge of the Alina's stand hummed with quiet activity. Officers moved in the background, focused on their work, ignoring the historic moment unfolding around them. "My name is Marcus Webb. I served with Ambassador Alina Vasquez for 20 years. She was my friend. She taught my daughter to ride a horse. She cried at my wife's funeral when I couldn't." He paused, his jaw tightened. "Your leaders murdered her. They thought we'd respond with rage, with blind destruction, with the kind of violence that would prove everything they believed about humanity." Another pause, longer. "They were wrong." Webb stepped closer to the camera. His eyes seemed to look through the screen, directly into every home, every heart, every moment of doubt. "Your leaders chose murder. We choose to remember what you forget, that war ends when one side decides mercy costs less than revenge. We could have destroyed your fleets. We could have bombed your worlds. We could have made you suffer the way we suffered." His voice dropped. "We didn't, because that's not who we are. That's not who Alina was, and we refuse to become the monsters your leaders tried to make us." The screen split. Alina's face appeared beside Webb's, smiling from an old photograph, arms wrapped around her daughter, hair wild from wind. "We're going to end this war," Webb continued. "Not with your surrender, with your choice. Every Thraxian citizen who wants peace will have it. Every Thraxian soldier who lays down weapons will be protected. Every Thraxian leader who ordered murder will face justice. Not our justice, not yours, but the kind that comes from seeing your own reflection and hating what looks back." He reached toward the camera. "Choose, not between us and your leaders. Choose between who you were and who you could become." The transmission ended. Across the compact, the Thraxians sat in silence. Then they started moving. On the Thraxis Prime, Jorik finally received his signal. He had spent weeks moving through the city's underground, building connections, gathering intelligence, waiting for the moment when the people were ready. Now, watching Webb's broadcast in a crowded shelter, He knew the moment had arrived. He stood, faces turned toward him, frightened, hopeful, desperate for something to believe in. "I knew Elena Vasquez," he said. "She died protecting me, protecting your leaders from their own bomb. She believed in peace. She believed in trust. She believed that even a species as different as yours could learn to see humanity not as a threat but as a promise." He pulled out a data slate, displayed a list of names. "These are the conspirators. These are the people who started this war. These are the people who lied to you, used you, sacrificed your children for their ambition." He set the slate down. "I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to remember, to tell your children, to build something better from the ruins they created." A Thraxian civilian stood, then another, then another. "What do we do?" someone asked. Jorek smiled, a human expression that had once seemed threatening, now seemed like hope. "You ask questions, you demand answers, you refuse to be silent." He picked up the slate and walked toward the door. "You become the conscience your leaders tried to kill." The operation lasted 11 minutes. Human special forces had trained for months, studying the Thraxian physiology, learning their security protocols, mapping every entrance and exit of every facility holding a conspirator. They moved in synchronized teams, each one targeting a specific individual, each one equipped with non-lethal weaponry and medical supplies. No Thraxian soldier died, not a single one. Specialists hit 12 facilities simultaneously: planetary capitals, military bunkers, private estates, each location chosen for maximum isolation, minimum civilian presence. Human ships provided cover, jamming communications, disabling alarms, ensuring that no reinforcements could arrive before the operation concluded. Admiral Thrak woke to hands on his throat, not choking, just holding. A human face hovered above him, lit by the dim glow of night vision equipment. "Admiral Thrak, you are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, violation of diplomatic protocols, and crimes against peace. You will come with us." Thrak tried to speak, but the human pressed a finger to his lips. "No arguments, no speeches. You had your chance to talk, now you get to listen." The extraction took 47 seconds. Thrak found himself bound, hooded, and loaded onto a human transport before his personal guards even realized he was gone. Across the Thraxian space, 36 other conspirators experienced identical awakenings. When the hoods came off, they were aboard the Elena's stand. The detention room was comfortable by human standards, warm, well-lit, equipped with chairs designed for the Thraxian physiology. Thrak sat in silence, studying his fellow prisoners. Generals, intelligence officers, political operatives, every person who had known about the assassination, every person who had approved it, every person who had helped cover it up. They were all here. The door opened. Admiral Webb entered, alone, unarmed, wearing the same uniform he had worn in the broadcast. He carried a data slate and nothing else. "Admiral Thrak," Webb said, "we finally meet." Thrak said nothing. "You don't have to talk. You don't have to confess. You don't have to do anything except watch." Webb set the data slate on the table between them. "This is Elena Vasquez's final recording. She made it 3 days before the bombing. She said she had a feeling something would go wrong." Webb activated the slate. Elena's face appeared, warm, intelligent, impossibly alive. She looked directly at the camera, directly at Thrak, directly at every conspirator watching from their own detention rooms across the ship. "Hello," she said. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead, and if I'm dead, you probably killed me." She smiled. No anger, no accusation, just sadness. "I told them you'd try this. I told my government, my staff, my family. I said humans understand sacrifice better than most. We've been sacrificing for each other since before we had words to describe it. And I said your species, your leaders at least, would see that sacrifice as weakness." She leaned closer to the camera. Here's what you didn't understand. Sacrifice isn't weakness. Sacrifice is proof. Proof that we value something more than survival. Proof that we can lose everything and still choose to protect others. Her voice dropped. You're going to lose this war. Not because we're stronger, because we've already won. We won the moment we decided your lives mattered more than our revenge. She sat back, her eyes softened. So here's my sacrifice. You get to live. You get to watch what happens next. You get to see your people rebuild, make peace, become something better than you ever allowed them to be. And you get to know, every day, every hour, every moment of your long lives, that we could have ended your species and chose not to. She smiled one last time. That's not mercy, that's victory, the kind you'll never understand. The recording ended. Silence filled the room. Thrax's hands trembled. His jaw worked, trying to form words, trying to find some response that would restore his certainty, his righteousness, his belief that humans were the monsters. Nothing came. Webb picked up the slate. You'll be transferred to neutral custody. The Interstellar Council will determine your fate, but before you go, I want you to know something. He leaned close. His voice carried no anger, just exhaustion, just grief, just the weight of everything he had lost. Alina believed in mercy. She believed in second chances. She believed that even people like you could learn to be better. He straightened. I don't believe that, but I loved her, so I'll pretend. He turned and walked out. Thrax sat alone with 36 co-conspirators, and the echo of a dead woman's voice. One of them started crying. The Interstellar Council convened an emergency session. Human representatives attended for the first time since the bombing. They presented evidence, witnesses, confessions. The Thraxian military faction dissolved. Admiral Thrak and his co-conspirators faced formal charges. High Minister Torval spoke to the council. His voice cracked. His hands shook. He apologized not for the conspiracy which he hadn't known, but for the arrogance that had made the conspiracy possible. We thought humans were volatile, he said. We thought they were dangerous. We were right, but we were also wrong. He looked at the human delegation. They are dangerous because they choose mercy. They are volatile because they choose forgiveness. And we will spend generations trying to understand how a species so capable of destruction could also be so capable of grace. The human delegation stood. Their leader, a woman named Sarin Watnabe, promoted from intelligence chief to ambassador, stepped forward. We don't want your guilt, she said. We want your partnership. We want your trust. We want your children to grow up in a galaxy where assassination is impossible, not because we guard against it, but because no one would consider it. She extended her hand. Alina believed in that galaxy. Help us build it. Torval took her hand. The council erupted in applause. The war ended not with a treaty, but with a funeral. Alina Vasquez's body had been recovered from the rubble, broken, burned but identifiable. Human recovery teams had worked for days, sifting through debris, identifying fragments, giving families something to bury. The funeral took place on Mars, at the Vasquez family homestead. Alina's daughter stood at the grave site, 18 years old, wearing her mother's diplomatic robes. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't sad, but because she had decided to honor her mother with strength instead of sorrow. Admiral Webb stood in the back, surrounded by officers who had served under him. Sarin Watnabe stood beside him, already preparing for her new role as ambassador to the reformed Thraxian government. She would have hated this, Webb said quietly. What? All of it, the war, the revenge, the speeches. He shook his head. She would have wanted us to just talk, to find a way through without anyone dying. Sarin touched his arm. No one died on our side. Not for lack of trying. Webb watched as Alina's daughter placed a handful of soil over the casket. Thrax people, the ones we captured, They're going to live. They're going to watch their society rebuild without them. They're going to know that we chose to let them exist. That's worse than death for them. I know. Webb's voice carried no satisfaction. That's why Alina would have hated it. The Interstellar Council rewrote diplomatic law. Humanity's terms were simple. Harm one human, face the entire species. No negotiation, no measured response. Absolute consequence. But also, shelter any human refugee. Protect any human traveler, and Earth became your fiercest ally. The Council debated for weeks. Some species called the terms aggressive, others called them fair, a few called them inevitable. In the end, they passed unanimously. Not because humanity had won the war, because humanity had refused to lose its soul winning it. Sarin Watanabe arrived on the Raxus Prime 6 months after the funeral. The city had changed. Reconstruction crews worked alongside human engineers, rebuilding what the war had damaged. The Raxian civilians moved through streets that no longer felt like prisons. Children played in parks that had once been military parade grounds. High Minister Torval met her at the diplomatic hall, the same hall where Alina had died. The rubble had been cleared. The walls had been repaired. But a single section remained untouched, the spot where Alina had stood when the bomb detonated. We left it as a memorial, Torval said. Your people asked us to. Sarin nodded. She would have appreciated that. They walked through the hall together, human and the Raxian, former enemies, tentative friends. Torval moved carefully, still recovering from his wounds, still learning to trust a species he had once dismissed as dangerous children. Your Admiral Webb, Torval said. He sent a message. He said humanity would not seek reparations. He said the bloodshed was enough. Webb doesn't believe in punishment, Sarin replied. He believes in consequences. There's a difference. Is there? Sarin stopped at the memorial site. A small plaque had been installed, plain metal, no ornamentation, just words. Alina Vasquez, she believed in peace. She died proving it was possible. Yes, Sarin said quietly, there's a difference. Punishment looks backward. Consequences look forward. Webb wanted to make sure your children remember what happened here, not to hate us, to understand us. Torval stood beside her. His species didn't cry. Their tear ducts had evolved away millennia ago. But something in his posture suggested grief that had nowhere else to go. Your people terrify us, he said. Not because you're strong, because you're kind. Because you had every reason to destroy us and you chose not to. We don't know how to respond to that. Sarin turned to face him. Then learn, that's all we ask, just learn. She extended her hand. Torval took it. The galaxy changed after the war. Not because humanity had proven its strength. Many species were stronger. Not because humanity had proven its mercy. Many species were kinder. The galaxy changed because humanity had proven that strength and mercy could coexist, that a species could be dangerous enough to end you and compassionate enough to save you, and that choosing the second option didn't make you weak. It made you terrifying in a way no weapon could match. Human ships continued to patrol the borders. Human diplomats continued to negotiate the peace. Human families continued to live, love, fight, and forgive under a yellow sun that had seen everything and judged nothing. And somewhere in a place beyond memory and time, Alina Vasquez watched. Not as a ghost, not as a legend. As a reminder of what one person could believe, of what one species could become, of what happened when you assassinated a human diplomat. The Raxian children learned the story differently than their parents had expected. Not as a tragedy, not as a warning, as a promise. There is a species out there, their teachers said, that could have ended us, that should have ended us, and they didn't, because one woman believed in peace more than she feared death. What was her name? The children asked. Alina, the teachers replied. Her name was Alina, and she proved that the universe is not a place of fear. What is it a place of? The teachers paused. Choice, they said. It's always been a place of choice. Outside, the stars waited. And somewhere in the darkness between them, human ships kept watch. Not for enemies. For friends they hadn't met yet. And,